Hi everyone, welcome, and I hope you'll enjoy the discussion. I'm Tom Van Hoven, International Development Consultant for IIMC. I have Ian Morris with me today, and we'll be talking about moving from virtual to hybrid meetings and the challenges that could pose to clerks and democratic officers. Welcome, Ian. Thanks for agreeing to share your views with us. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh, hi everyone. I'm Ian Morris. I'm the Chief Officer and Town Clerk at Peterlee Town Council. So Peterlee's up in glorious County Durham in the northeast of England. I've been Chief Officer at Peterlee for about 4.5 years. Before that, I've had quite a mixed career working in various senior roles in local government in the UK. But I've also worked in the private sector and also for a few years as a self-employed business consultant. But yeah, at the moment, I'm the Chief Officer at Peterlee Town Council. Great.
Thanks for taking the time to speak to us, Ian. What's the size of the population in Peterlee and how many council members do you have?
Peterlee's population is about 21,000. Peterlee is a new town. It was one of the first wave of post-World War II new towns built in England. So it was kind of built from the 1960s onwards. But yeah, population today of about 21,000. We've got 22 elected councillors, elected members on the council, about 40 salaried staff. Our annual budget this year is about £2.2 million. So for the UK, we're a relatively large local council.
As you say, a fairly large town then. Interesting, I spoke to a chap yesterday in Idaho in America. They've got about 120,000 population, and wow. They only have 6 elected council members. And it's interesting how it differs here. The town I used to work for here in the UK was a borough. We had 48 councillors with about 120,000 population. So it varies across the world.
Yeah.
We know that councils have been hosting virtual meetings during the pandemic, but as we come out of lockdown, I can imagine that there will be the hope to meet face-to-face again sometime. For some, virtual meetings have advantages, less travel, more flexibility. What's been your experience in Peterlee?
Well, Tom, I think it might be something to do with our heritage as a kind of innovative new town. But in Peterlee, we do like to push the boundaries a bit from time to time. And so when the UK government announced the first stay-at-home lockdown in March 2020, we'd already actually adopted hybrid meetings as a way to ensure that our council could continue to function as a democratic body. At the time, COVID was quite a new thing. Nobody was really sure where it was going, but we'd already identified that we wanted to make sure that we could keep on going and keep on serving our town, whatever was going to happen. So I'd already purchased the Zoom software on, I think it was 20th of March 2020, a few days before the government sort of lockdown announcements. And actually, coincidentally, the very same evening that Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced the stay-at-home message, 23rd of March, I think that was, we actually already had scheduled our first hybrid meeting. So bearing in mind that the UK government didn't actually publish the sort of flexibilities regulations that formally made online meetings okay, until they didn't publish that until about April. So we're actually ahead of the curve. We'd already adopted hybrid meetings as a way to keep on functioning as a democratic organisation, and then the government caught up with us. So yeah, we continued to meet online, well, in hybrid meetings, and I want to talk about that a little bit later on, I think. But we continued to have hybrid meetings from March 2020 right through until January of this year, January 2021, when with the latest restrictions in the UK, that our councils actually decided that they were going to stay at home, and so January and February have been purely online meetings. But we didn't miss a single meeting. So where some other sort of local authorities kind of things shut down a little bit for a few months while they worked out what they were going to do. We met in March, we met in April, we met in May. We just kept on meeting, and I think it was a time where the councillors and the staff as well, actually, we were just determined that with all the hardship and suffering that was happening in our community, we weren't going to shrink away from the task. You know, we're public servants and we wanted to be there doing whatever we could to help the community. And it's interesting because the council's Latin motto is viam inveniam aut faciam, which basically is I will either find a way or make one. I think it's quite interesting that culturally that's kind of, I guess, what we did really. We decided early on that we were going to find a way to keep on meeting or would make one. And like I say, we adopted that hybrid model before it was even, strictly speaking, a lawful way of meeting in the UK.
Yeah, really interesting. I imagine as things return to normal that people will have the wish to either have a choice how they attend meetings in future, whether they attend in person or via a virtual way. What, in your view, constitutes a hybrid meeting? I know people talk of hybrid meetings, but I don't think everybody has the same view as to what constitutes a hybrid meeting. How do you see that?
Yeah, it's a good point, Tom. You're right. There are sort of mixed opinions about it. I think we're really clear and have been from the start. So when we talk about a hybrid meeting, it's a meeting that's held in a virtual space. I mean, technically it's a physical space because somewhere in a server room somewhere on a computer, the meeting's, I guess, happening. But for us, right from the start, our council meeting happens in a virtual space. And a proportion of the people who are joining the meeting are actually sat together in a room. So they are in a physical place together. And that physical space is joining the online meeting, as well as other participants who might be at home or on the bus or wherever. But I think just from a conceptual perspective, it's not a meeting in the room that other people are trying to dial into. It's a virtual meeting. And some people are physically sat together and some people are separate in different locations. And that concept of a meeting in a virtual space is a really important one. And I think it gives, I think one of the reasons why it's important is because it gives a better sense of equality between those who are in the physical meeting and those who might be at home or wherever and sort of joining remotely from different locations. So no one's missing. It's not like there's a bunch of people in the room and there's a few others missing, but they've managed to join from somewhere else. That isn't the way that it works for us conceptually. The meeting is held, we use Zoom, so the meeting is held online in Zoom, and everybody is online in Zoom. We're all together. It just happens that some people are physically together in one room and some people are joining from other rooms in other places. And I think that is, that again, that's something that we sort of adopted quite early on. And I think, I think it has been a bit of a stretch, and certainly I think some practitioners working in the public sector has maybe taken a bit of time to get their heads around that. But actually, like, virtual meetings have been really commonplace in the private sector for decades. I mean, before I started in my current role, and a couple of jobs ago, I worked for a multinational software company based in Sydney, Australia, and I would be in virtual meetings with colleagues in meeting rooms in their homes in different countries. They were in car parks, on trains, all over the world, and we would get together for meetings. We wouldn't even think about it. We just did it. Now our kind of Europe, Middle East and Africa regional meetings quite often were in the same time zone, so they weren't too bad. But our head office was in Australia, so quite often I'd be in a work meeting at like midnight, or even in the early hours of the morning, and and I think we just kind of got on with it. And it's a very successful company. They do really well. So I think it's really, in a way, our sector's, this whole concept of hybrid meetings and meeting online, it's actually just a bit of the public sector catching up with what's been happening elsewhere for a long time. And I think hybrid meetings have got some real advantages. Staff, from a staffing perspective, we're able to get a better sort of balance between work, with the work-life balance. Our meetings tend to be on a Monday night. So in the physical meeting world, the old world pre-COVID, I might do a 8, 9, 10 hour shift and then stay back late to be in the council meeting. I live about 40 minutes away from our council offices. So, but, you know, I'd maybe get home at 10 p.m. or later on an evening. Whereas obviously, you know, with the virtual meetings, people can actually join from home. You know, it's much easier. If I've got colleagues who are presenting a report to the council, you know, they're doing that from home. They don't have to be sat around in the meeting room waiting. So I think from a staffing perspective, it's really good from work-life balance. You know, and the same for the elected members. You know, the councillors are people; they have lives. So, you know, we've got a lot of our councillors are retired or are not working, but some of them do have you know, work commitments. They've got other civic commitments. They've got family commitments. And I think in terms of accessibility as well, you know, we've got people in our community who might have mental or physical health issues, and actually that, you know, getting to a physical meeting on a regular basis and being in a room in the old way that we used to do things might have been a barrier to some people becoming councillors. And actually the ability to meet online is, I think it makes things more accessible, and I think it might well encourage other people to join the council in the future. And then obviously from members of the public, you know, you can't get much more accessible than an online meeting, provided that you can access the internet. And most people in our, sorry, I should have turned my phone off, bear with me one moment. You know, most people in our local communities do have access to the internet in some way or another. Provided you've got access to the internet, you can see the meeting. You have an opportunity to scrutinise the council. In the old world, you know, yes, our meetings are open to the public, but you've got to get off your backside, get in the car or get in a bus or on a bike and get to the council offices, and this strange place where people are sat around and they all know each other, but I don't know anybody and I feel a bit intimidated. But actually all that's gone with an online meeting that the public can attend. So I think, you know, there's so much to sort of go in for online and hybrid meetings. As far as I'm concerned, the online meetings for councils are long overdue and they're here to stay.
Really interesting. Yeah, and you touched on a very important point there, which is about the idea that there's equality between the people actually in the meeting physically and those joining virtually, because I think that's still an issue for people. I hear a lot of times people saying, yes, but if I join virtually, I'm disadvantaged because I'm not in the same room, I can't see body language and things like that. So that is something to get your head round, that actually people are equal in how they join the meeting. You don't have to be physically there to be part of the meeting.
Yeah, you know, I think it changes the dynamic, doesn't it? So, you know, we are social animals. So, you know, there is definitely something, you know, I'm not advocating a complete stopping of physical meetings. I don't, you know, we've learned something in COVID that we need to be with people and to connect with people. And it's difficult if we can't. But I think one of the things that it does is quite often in any group of humans, you have some people who are more extrovert and more confident, more outspoken, and some people who are more introvert, less confident, less outspoken. And when everybody's in a physical room together, you get that dynamic of sometimes the mouthy ones are the ones that get heard, and some people can feel a bit intimidated and don't wish to speak. I think one of the things that we found with our hybrid meetings is actually that some of the councillors who perhaps in the past might not have said very much in council meetings maybe feel a bit more comfortable if they're sat at home and more able to contribute because they're in their natural environment. And so I think it's, yeah, you know, I can understand some people saying that they feel like they lose a bit of influence if they're not in a physical room. But I think on the other side of that coin, in some ways it can maybe help people feel more confident if they are in a more familiar environment.
No, that's true. But I think that's also something we need to keep in mind, or people need to keep in mind when they manage meetings, is to make sure that they make those people feel part of it. I know that current legislation in the UK is going to, or in England, is going to come to an end on the 6th of May, but discussions are taking place between local government sector and government as to the future. Do you think they'll be able to sort this out so that you can continue with hybrid meetings in future?
Yes, I definitely do. So, you know, the way that things are in the UK at the moment, on the 6th of May, the current flexibility regulations will expire, and so we'll go back to the primary legislation, which is the Local Government Act 1972 and the Public Bodies Admissions to Meetings Act 1960. Now that in itself I just find it's crazy, isn't it? Do you know who was #1 in the UK single charts when the Admissions to Meetings Act was introduced? Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley was It's Now or Never. When in 1972, when the 1972 Local Government Act came in, it was Gilbert O'Sullivan with Claire. 1972 was the year that I was conceived. I mean, to think that we're going to go back to legislation that from way back then is a little bit crazy. The internet wasn't invented until 1986. Zoom wasn't founded as a company until 2011. So we asked the question whether councils will be able to continue with hybrid meetings. I emphatically yes, and I think that anything else would be a terrible mistake. I think if we go back to physical meetings only, we might as well stick on our 1970s bell bottoms and film the meetings in black and white and on a VCR cassette tape. We can't step back in time. It's ludicrous. And what's really interesting is I firmly believe that here in the UK, online meetings were always possible anyway. The 1960 and 1972 Acts don't prohibit online meetings. Well, and of course they don't, because the internet wasn't invented when they were written, so they wouldn't possibly say you can't meet online. And if you look at some of the language that's used in those acts, so the 1960 Admissions to Meetings Act, it just requires that council meetings are open to the public. That's it. Okay. So there's nothing in the 1960 Admissions to Meetings Act that says that meetings have to happen in a room and the public have to be able to get into that room as well. It doesn't say, it doesn't qualify open to the public. It just says open to the public. I don't, as I said before, I don't think you can get any more open to the public than casting your meeting live on social media or on YouTube or what have you. It's a meeting that's broadcast live to the entire world is certainly more open to the public than a meeting in a pokey room in a council building that you've got to find and get to and get in, and that's not very open to the public. But a live streamed meeting, absolutely open to the public. So I think the 1960 Admissions to Meetings Act, no problem. As far as I'm concerned, online meetings can continue and satisfy that primary legislation. We don't need the flexibility regulations. So the other big piece of law in the UK, obviously, is the 1970 Local Government Act. Now that doesn't prohibit online meetings either. Of course not, because in 1972 there wasn't an internet, so we wouldn't possibly say you can't meet online. There wasn't an online. So the 1972 Local Government Act talks about place. So it says that the notice of the meeting needs to specify the time and place of the meeting. But an online meeting is a place. As far as I'm concerned, you and I are meeting somewhere, aren't we? We're having a meeting. We're in, you might say to somebody, I'll see you in the Zoom meeting later on. An online meeting is a place. The 1972 Act talks about attendance at meetings. So we have a 6-month rule about if a councillor doesn't attend a meeting for 6 months, they're automatically disqualified from office. But clearly, being in an online meeting is attending that meeting. I'm attending this call with you, Tom. Anybody who said I wasn't because it's online, you just laugh at them. Ian didn't attend the meeting with Tom. Yes, I did. I was there. You can watch the video. So as far as I'm concerned, attendance. It doesn't say attendance means you have to be in a physical room with somebody. It doesn't say that, because of course in 1972 nobody imagined there was any other way of being in a meeting than being in a meeting in a room. And the 1972 Act also says that the only thing it says about that kind of gives any hint about a place is there's a part of the Act that says that council meetings shall be held at such place either within or without their area as they may direct. Isn't it great the way they write these words? So actually at present, and again, this a little bit contentious this, but at present, my council could decide to meet in Paris or New York or Durban, right? And it would be perfectly lawful because the 1972 Local Government Act says we can meet in our area or somewhere else. So if we can lawfully hold a council meeting in Paris or New York or Durban, I'm certain we can sure as hell have one online. You know, in terms of the meaning of the act, to make it accessible, to make meetings accessible to the public, it's sure is a lot more accessible to have a meeting in Zoom online or streamed in YouTube or Facebook or whatever than it is to have it in Durban. No offense to South Africa, but you know, like, so you know, as far as I can see, there's nothing in the 1960 or the 1972 Acts that actually makes online meetings illegal after the 6th of May. Certainly not illegal, because it's not prohibited, so it's not illegal. And I think that actually online meetings are perfectly lawful. And some people get a bit huffy about that because they say, well, there's these regulations in place at the moment that expire on the 6th of May, and when they go, then we can't meet online again. And it's like, but why? The regulations did clarify that attending a meeting is okay if you do it online. And the current flexibility regulations do clarify that open to the public also includes an online meeting. An online meeting is open to the public. But once just because it clarifies those things, when the flexibility regulations disappear, it doesn't mean that those things aren't allowed, because the 1960 Act and the 1972 Act do not prohibit online meetings. So,
it's interesting. I guess for principal councils with responsibility for things like planning, social services, education, the issue of lawfulness is a major concern. And I just hope the government sorts this out, because I just cannot imagine, as you say, going back to the old way of doing things. I think virtual meetings have become part of the future and will remain part of the future.
No, I agree, and you know, like you say, hopefully government will sort this mess out. I'm not sure they will before the 6th of May. We know that there's some I think approaches being made to the courts themselves in the UK to try and get the courts to make a declaration to say that they would interpret the 1960 and 1972 Acts to include those descriptions of online and open to the public and attendance and things as being, you know, that an online meeting is lawful under the current legislation. So I think either the government sorting it out, which might take a while, or the courts making a declaration to say that if somebody did challenge this, we would find that that, you know, all of the things being equal, that an online meeting could absolutely satisfy the 1960 and 1972 Acts. But you know, so I think, you know, the more important the decision that you're going to make in the council meeting, the more adverse to risk you're going to be about a challenge on the lawfulness of the meeting and therefore the lawfulness of a decision that's made. But I'm still firmly of the belief that actually an online meeting, as long as everything else is done correctly in line with the legislation, that just because there are some people online does not make that meeting unlawful. That fact that it's online and everybody isn't in a room, there's nothing in the 1962 and the 1960 and the 1972 Acts that actually say that that's an unlawful thing.
Yeah,
that's my personal view anyway.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. I imagine you're very passionate about this, and I imagine you've discussed it with your members. Is that their view as well, that they would like to continue meeting in this way, or are there some that says no, we've got to go back to face-to-face meeting?
Yeah, I think that I think it's, you know, hybrid's definitely the way forward for us. I think that I don't think we'll ever, even if we wanted to, and we don't, I don't think we'd ever fully replace physical meeting spaces any more than we'll ever replace physical working. You know, lots of us have got used to working from home, but no, I'm not suggesting for a second that we should get rid of offices. Because we are, like I said before, we are social animals, and the one thing that COVID has taught us is that we need to connect with people, and that's sometimes it's better to do that in a physical sense by being around people physically. But I think my members can definitely appreciate the flexibility that hybrid meetings have brought, and also that the meetings, and you know, and I think it's made the meetings and local democracy generally in our area more accessible to the citizens that we serve. It's easier to attend a council meeting when it's online than it is if it's in a physical place, and not just to sit and watch it, but also for people who might have questions to raise, or our partners out in the community, or, you know, local community groups and what have you. So much easier for us just to give them a slot and they can just jump onto a Zoom meeting and say their piece and jump off, than having to drive out, come to the meeting, get parked, come in. It's all a bit intimidating, it's a bit strange. So I think members have really got their heads around that as a way of opening up that kind of accessibility. And so instead of telling the public that they have to come to us, we're going out to them. So we can now conduct our meetings in their living rooms, in their cars, in their in their kitchen, wherever they are at 6 o'clock on a Monday night. We'll conduct our meeting in that place with them, as long as they can access the internet. How can anybody argue with that?
Yeah. Sure. No, I agree with that. What arrangements have you got in place at the moment? If you could just talk us through that a bit.
So we use Zoom like lots of other people out there. There is other software obviously, but Zoom seems to be the one that people have really adopted. From March 2020 up until December 2020, we made a meeting room available in our main offices, where members could come and sit socially distanced and meet, physically meet. And in that room, we had a USB camera, a microphone, a good quality microphone, a PA sound system set up, and a projector and a screen. So basically, that allowed the meeting room to join the Zoom meeting. So that's back to that concept of the meeting's held in Zoom, but there's a room that joins the Zoom meeting as well as other individual people joining the meeting. And we had anywhere between, I think probably the least about 5 and maybe the most up to about 15 councillors in the room. We're quite lucky, we've got some quite large rooms, so it was easy, you can get people in and space them out. And then we might have a couple of members of the staff in there as well, but the rest of the councillors would be joining, and any members of the public and what have you would be joining via Zoom remotely. So our agendas would go out with the Zoom details on. So it says a meeting will be held online, and it's got all the joining details and what have you. The meeting is publicised as an online meeting. But the concept is that we make this like private meeting space available. So some members who maybe don't have technology issues or would just, like I said before, they would just rather meet face to face. They would rather be in the room with some other people. So they can come and actually be in a physical place. And they join the meeting through the Zoom technology. But the meeting is held online. Okay.
So moving forward, when the public will be able to attend in person, what do you need to change to enable them to actually attend the meeting physically?
Yeah, well, that's I think a point of like debate at the moment, isn't it? Like here in the UK, we're sort of on a roadmap to the restrictions being lifted. So I think part of it depends on the timing of that and what's actually sort of lawfully able to happen. I think when the main restrictions were in place, we would have some councillors in the room somewhere, but the public couldn't attend that meeting. It's a private meeting, if you like. We didn't invite the public. The only way the public could attend the meeting was to do it through Zoom. As we move forward, when it's allowed to happen, then that room would also be open to public to come and sit in if they wanted to. But I think a lot of members of the public would actually probably continue to access our meetings online rather than coming out on a cold and wet March evening to get to a physical meeting. So I think we'll just adapt it. Like I say, we have quite large rooms. From a health and safety perspective, we probably could get a certain number of people into the room and have them socially distanced, depending on what the law was at the time as these COVID restrictions get lifted. But I think it's a really interesting issue because the law requires that our meetings are open to the public, but there isn't an individual right to attend the meeting. So any of us, even pre-COVID, all of our meeting rooms would have a limit of people for health and safety perspective, fire regulations. So you can only get a certain number of people in a room pre-COVID when we're meeting like normal and with our flared bell-bottom jeans on and in black and white. So if a busload of 1,000 people turned up to one of our meetings, they wouldn't all get in, and that wouldn't be unlawful because no individual citizen has the right to attend the meeting. We have to have the meeting open to the public but how many public can actually come will be dictated by health and safety regulations or whatever else. So as the COVID restrictions start to be lifted, and as we start to hold physical meetings again, the number of people that can actually get into the room will be dictated by our health and safety risk assessment. So, if they have to sit 2 meters apart, if you can only have, you can only be with people from the same household or what have you, we'll just have to limit the numbers of people who can attend accordingly. But like I say, and that's a great thing about keeping up with the online side of things, is that if we can actually also have the meeting streamed live, then it actually removes that problem, because people can come if they can get in safely. If they can't get in safely, then they can still attend the meeting online.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Jumping ahead to technology, Ian, what is the setup you opted for?
So in terms of the actual room that we meet in, so we kind of set it up in like an open circle, or like a horseshoe shape, and that we took a few meetings to get the right layout for the room. And the reason for that is that the USB microphone goes in the center of that horseshoe. So basically everybody in the room is facing the microphone. When we first set up the rooms, we had it in kind of like a classroom style, with a bit more like our traditional council meetings would have had, with the chairman at the front and the members all facing them. But some of them were too far away from the microphone, and it was very hard to pick up what they were saying for those people that were joining from outside of the room. So after a bit of experimentation, we have a horseshoe sort of shaped layout. Each of the councillors has their own table and chair, so they're not, they're 2 meters apart from each other. We've got a large screen and projector that's attached to my laptop, and that's where we project the Zoom meeting onto the screen, so that the people in the room can see the people that are on the Zoom call. I bought a decent quality microphone. It's by a company called Blue. It's a Blue Yeti. So that just plugs straight into my laptop, and that's, like I say, positioned in the center of the horseshoe. I've got a USB camera. It's actually mounted. I've now mounted that up above the projection screen, because as humans we like to look at the people that we're talking to. So when we first started doing hybrid meetings, I had the camera off to one side, but it was a bit weird because members couldn't quite get their heads around where to look. Do you look at the camera, or do you look at the screen of where the person's image that you're speaking to is? So now the USB camera is mounted just above the screen. So when you look at the screen, you're also looking into the camera. I've got a very basic PA system, a speaker system that plugs into the headphone socket on my laptop, so that you get a decent amount of sound in the room, again from the Zoom meeting. And that's really it. A USB microphone with an extension cable, a USB camera with an extension cable, a projector, a screen, and a small speaker system. That's it. We don't have a voting system. We've never used electronic voting before, and we found it works absolutely fine. Voting is by a show of hands. Even when you've got 15, 20 people on a Zoom meeting, we can still arrange the screen in a way that we can count the votes anyway. So yeah, it's worked absolutely fine. Really fairly simple technology.
Oh, very interesting. What will happen if your technology goes down, fails during the meeting?
Well, I mean, like we'll just adapt, I guess. So what would happen in the old days if the fire alarm went off, or the roof leaked, or the light, the power cut and the lights went off? You would just adapt. You would adjourn the meeting. You would, so far, touch woods, we haven't had any major technology mishaps. There's some really clever people put a lot of time and effort into designing this hardware and software, and I think as clerks, we'd have to work quite hard to break it and break the internet. So in a way, actually, maybe doing the stuff using technology and doing it online actually makes it a bit safer, and some of those platforms are a bit more robust than a meeting room might be. So I think the answer to your question is we'll just deal with it in the way that us clerks deal with anything that pops up in meetings. Goodness knows there's some strange things can happen sometimes. But yeah, the worst case scenario, we just adjourn the meeting and try and get things restarted. I've had situations where sort of remote participants have their home broadband's dropped out, or things that happen at sometimes get a bit of user error, people who aren't quite as au fait with technology, but we just deal with it. I have my mobile phone next to me when we're conducting the meetings, and sometimes I get a councillor phoning me up and saying they can't do something, but it's normally pretty simple, and we just sort it.
It goes back to what the motto is for your council.
Yeah, find a way or make one.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Just listening to what you've put in place, I often hear people saying, oh my goodness, this is going to cost a lot of money, we can't afford that, whatever.
Yeah.
How much did it cost you?
Yeah, I think the total setup has cost us about £220. So the USB microphone and the extension cable is about £130. I got that from Amazon, next day delivery. The USB camera, again with an extension cable, that again I think I got from Amazon. That was about £37, I think, paid for that. The projector and the HDMI cable to attach the projector to my laptop, I actually already had those, so but projectors aren't very expensive nowadays, and a lot of councils will already have them. I think the speaker system was about £50, if that. And it's like anything, isn't it? A council can only not afford to do something if it doesn't think it's important enough. All councils have reserves of some size or another. We can raise money through taxation. So if the members think it's important, it gets done. That's generally what happens in our council anyway. So but I think fear of change is not a sufficient excuse for freezing democracy. Like just saying, well, we can't meet because it's a bit difficult to do things online. That doesn't work for me, especially not when that cost is £220. Even a small council can find £220, I'm sure.
That's very interesting. Thank you. The setup you have, is it a complex setup? Do you require more staff in running the meeting? How do you do that?
No, I think it's a Zoom meeting. So I would say it probably takes about 45 minutes, if that, to set up the room. We always ask the councillors to confirm who's going to come in to the physical room, so we know exactly how many people. So we set up the room so it's for that number of people only, which it just helps us with the spacing and what have you. But so basically, yeah, a little bit of shifting a few chairs around, setting up the projector and the laptop and the screen and those different things. Maybe 45 minutes, I guess. And then you just launch the meeting in Zoom and get on with it. The technology is more or less foolproof. Like we just got to trust it. I'd say I used to work for a software company, but I'm no way a tech expert. I worked on the people side of the software industry. Like what I did learn working for a software company was that there were some really, really clever people who put a lot of time and effort into making sure that software works, and they try really hard to break it before it gets anywhere near us. So I think you set up the room, you switch on the Zoom technology, and just let it do its job. And it's really is quite straightforward. I think it's perfectly possible for one person to support the chairman and also manage the speakers online with Zoom. I've got my laptop set up. I'm supporting the chairman. I can see the Zoom meetings. What's on my screen is projected up on the big screen that the members can also see. But occasionally there's a few things going on. You've got they've just passed a resolution. They're moving on to the next item. The chairman's not sure which of the next item of business is. I've got somebody on the Zoom call saying that they're struggling with something. So I might just say, I'm sorry, Chairman, can you just give me a minute, please? But that would happen in a normal meeting if a few things were going on. So I think you just got to work with the chairman in a slightly different way. But it's absolutely possible. I just think it takes a bit of courage and a bit of openness and willingness to change, and just accepting that there might well be some teething issues, but focus on the benefits, and also have some fun. So back in March 2020, when I first bought the Zoom software, I invited our senior managers and the chairs of the different council committees to a COVID briefing using the Zoom technology. But I asked everybody to wear their favourite item of headwear. The first thing we did at the start of the meeting was just explain why we had this silly hat on, or whatever people were wearing. And those things that people bought on holidays, or things that people had since they were kids, or whatever. We just did it as a way to kind of break the ice and make it a slightly less formal meeting. But we've held online quizzes. We just wanted to, early on, we just wanted to get to practice how to use the software. So we had staff meetings using it. We contacted other people. Excuse me. I even encouraged some of the staff that also use Zoom for other things to sort of to use it for home stuff. So they have a call with some family that you haven't seen for a while or something. And I think we had an internal sort of Q&A session as well. So we sort of opened up a Zoom, sent out a Zoom invite to all our councillors, got them to log in, but part of it was just asking questions about what is this thing? Like, I can see you. Hello, I like the colour of your wallpaper. And it was just a way to get people a bit more familiar with the software before the actual sort of relative formality of a council meeting. But yeah, I think it's just a case of just getting stuck into it really, and trusting that the technology will work. If there's a problem, it's likely to be like user error, and you just got to accept that we're human and sometimes we make mistakes, particularly when we're learning new things.
Very true. Very true. Did you have to put any meeting protocols in place that you didn't have?
Not really. No, we have the same basic standing orders as we would have for physical meetings. I think so. We've got elections in May this year. So I think once the election's concluded, we've sort of got the new council on board. We might well revise standing orders a little bit, just in a few areas that sort of makes it a bit tidier in terms of us continuing with the online meetings, but nothing sort of major. We encourage, whereas normally the meeting starts at 6 o'clock or 6:30, where we encourage people, we sort of launch the Zoom meeting probably about half an hour before the actual formal meeting's due to start. And we encourage people to try to log in about maybe 15, 20 minutes before the meeting starts. And that just means that anybody who's got any technology issues has got time to actually deal with it. Like I say, I have my mobile phone next to me, so people might ring or text or whatever if they've got some problems. We did have a few, in terms of like behaviours. We've had a few issues. We've got some of our councillors have got slightly or had slightly lower sort of levels of experience or confidence using technology, but I think all of them really have got used to it now. It's, like I say, it's fairly straightforward. My mum uses Zoom. She's a wonderful woman. She's not brilliant with technology, but she can use it. And I think that the members have just adapted. And like I say, the Zoom, it sounds like an advert for Zoom, but Zoom is pretty straightforward to use. Once you've learned which buttons do what, it's pretty straightforward. And the councillors have really taken on board. I do have I think one member who do sometimes struggle a bit. At a meeting a couple of weeks ago, he kept on taking himself off mute. But he was sat at home on his sofa, and his wife was watching Emmerdale Farm or Coronation Street, one of the soap operas. So we're having this sort of game of like table tennis. So basically, like, he keeps on unmuting himself, and you just get this blast of really loud TV music across the speaker, obviously, because Zoom will pick up whichever microphone's the loudest. So I would mute him straight away. So I've got my fingers on the trigger, and I'm ready and waiting for him going, go on, unmute. So he had to mute himself, so you get this blast of soap opera again. And then I hit mute, and then he unmutes himself. I don't know why he was doing it, but he was. I'm assuming it's because a little thing comes up on his phone that says you are now muted, and he mustn't have thought that was a good thing, so he kept on unmuting himself. And it was going backwards and forwards like this. Now I tried to message him in Zoom. He got the messaging function. I said, yeah. I'm not naming the individual, but would you mind stop unmuting yourself, please? But in the end, another one of the councillors who was also actually on the online call, he just said out loud, "For heaven's sake," name of the person, "will you stop unmuting yourself, please?" And that kind of did the trick. He didn't unmute himself after that. You do get a little bit from a behavioural perspective. I think it's just a little bit of adaptation. Members, we we ask everybody to be on mute apart from when they're speaking, and they generally sort of raise their hand, although there is also a raise hand icon thing that you can do in Zoom as well, obviously. But you know, so there's a few little protocols that we try to adopt just to make the meeting go more smoothly. But I would say, you know, the members have been superb. They've really adapted to it very well. And like I say, occasionally have a bit of a laugh because of something that's happening. I think one thing that is worth sort of keeping an eye on is just that although you've got the benefit of people feeling more comfortable in their home environment, and that can be great because it means that some people can feel more able to contribute to the meeting. Sometimes they can feel maybe a little bit over comfortable. So we have had a couple of incidences of people maybe like smoking, because if they smoke in their own home. Wow. But our policies are that we've got quite a strict no smoking policy, and that includes for councillors when they're on council duties. So, you know, that's something that we've had to say, like, I know you're at home, but you can't actually smoke when you're in this meeting. Yeah. And we have another incident where somebody was drinking alcohol, which isn't actually against a policy, but it's just maybe not quite appropriate for a meeting that's been broadcast in public. So we've had to. Sometimes that is that kind of bit of familiarity about being in your own environment. So we've done a little bit of a briefing note just to help members understand give them some things to think about in terms of how they sort of behave when they're in their home environment. But I
suppose that's typical at the start of doing something new. Yeah. Once people are used to it, it just won't be an issue anymore. So.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, members of the public, how do they have to register to speak in advance of the meeting? How does it work for members of the public?
Yeah, so we had a register of attendance, if you like, for physical meetings when pre-COVID, when people were coming to our council buildings. But that was really more for just a building safety, building management perspective. If the fire alarm goes off or we need to evacuate, we need to know who's there. So we've never required people to register to attend a meeting, and I don't think they should have to. I think that, you know, the fewer barriers we have in place of people attending, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Our meetings are open to the public, full stop. I think that if they do wish to speak, then we on our standard council agenda, we have a public participation session at the start of the meeting. Now, very often, if a member of the public doesn't want to raise a question, they'll have contacted us anyway to ask when the next council meeting is or what have you. But we don't require them to register. And in print, I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but in principle, somebody could just join on the day. We don't know who they are, but they could indicate that they wish to address the council. But that could happen in a physical meeting pre-COVID. Somebody could just turn up. We have no idea who they are. They sit down and they ask if they can ask a question. You know, like we wouldn't generally ask them to pre-register or anything like that. In the online meeting, if they sort of, you know, did want to talk, we'd unmute them. And obviously, once they'd finished, just like we do with every other speaker, once they're finished, we'd put them back on mute. We'd let them know that they're very welcome to continue to attend the meeting if they want to. Most of the time, people just leave after they've said their piece, and that's with an online meeting, they feel more comfortable doing that. Mm-hmm. You know, obviously, if there was a motion to exclude the public, which is something that we can do in the UK context, then obviously I'd have to ask them to leave, and if they didn't leave, I could, you know, very gently kick them out of the Zoom meeting. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it works fine. We don't require people to pre-register to attend or speak at a meeting.
Good. Do members of the public view a webcast? Do you webcast your meeting?
Up until now, we've just been making the Zoom login details available to the public, and I think that's worked fine because we haven't had such massive numbers attending that it gets us in trouble with our Zoom capacity. But I know some people are a bit worried about that, and you know, what if we get hijacked by unruly elements or what have you? So we'd have, you know, at the moment things have worked fine just by making the Zoom details available, and people have been joining the Zoom meeting. But we do have the option to cast from Zoom straight into Facebook. The council's got Facebook and YouTube channels. So I've enabled the Zoom facility to cast directly into Facebook and YouTube. So you can basically just stream the meeting live into those two channels. We haven't actually done it yet. We're planning. I think we're planning to do it for our annual meeting in May after the elections. So I'm just working with my Democratic Services Manager on that at the moment. We're a little bit nervous, but we have trialed it. I did trial a quick cast. I actually got a, you know, there's in the UK, there's this thing that people who are old in the tooth like me will remember about the test card, which is something that used to be on the telly when there wasn't a program on. You just got this like picture of a girl with using a chalkboard and some really cheesy music playing. I actually found that test card video on YouTube. So I did a live simulcast through the council social media channels of the test card, just for a few seconds, just making sure it worked. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a kind of fingers crossed and take a deep breath moment. But I think if assuming that works well in May, then what we're likely to do is we won't be publishing the Zoom login details anymore. We'll just put the details of where people can actually view the simulcast in YouTube or Facebook. We haven't quite worked out exactly how that's going to work yet. So that in that scenario, then if somebody did want to actually speak at the meeting, they would have to get in touch with us, and we would give them the login details for Zoom. I must admit, I prefer just publishing the Zoom meeting because I think so far, like I said, we haven't had any issues. But there's a risk that I'll become guilty of being stuck in a rut if I just stick with that. So we are going to experiment with that simulcast in social media and start publishing the Zoom login details and just see what happens. Okay.
I think we've covered the issue about whether it's more time consuming to set up, and you said it was easier and less time consuming to set up with a new system.
Yeah, I think so.
Just want to move on to voting. How do you you don't use a voting system? It's just by show of hands?
Yeah, that's correct. So it's just by show of hands. Most of the time we don't even do a counted vote. It's just a simple majority. So you know, a lot of resolutions that get passed, it's just, you know, those in favour, and you know the chairman just sees that, you know, roughly more than half of the members have put their hands up. Sometimes we count it, sometimes we don't. It depends on maybe the importance of the resolution that's being passed. So yeah, we don't use an electronic voting system. You know, I think Zoom has some functionality around that. I've not tried it out, to be honest with you. We just the way that our standing orders are set up and the way that we normally work is just a show of hands, and that's it.
Okay. Can members of the public and members join by telephone?
Yeah, they can do. So, you know, again, just using the Zoom functionality. So we do with the agenda and the notice of the meeting. We also put the phone numbers that members of the public could use, or members of the council could use if they wanted to. We haven't had anybody join by phone yet. So, you know, you're right. It is even for those people who don't have access to the internet, they could still actually phone into the meeting if they wanted to. We put a caveat in bold to say, you know, please check with your network supplier just in case there are any charges. But yeah, we do publish the telephone access numbers as well.
Good. I suppose not all members are equally proficient with technology. Did you do some training with members?
Yeah, we did some training. Like I say, we had some like practice meetings and encouraging people to try and log in beforehand, and then sort of troubleshooting with them. My deputy, our Democratic Services Manager, has even, you know, they've had councillors coming in to the office so that we can show them how to use it if they're not sure. I think we circulate right when we very first bought the Zoom software. I cobbled together a fairly basic sort of training document, just a few do's and don'ts and how-tos, so that was circulated. But yeah, again, I think it's fairly straightforward stuff. It's just, it's more, I think the barrier is more fear than complexity. I think it's just, you just got to get stuck in and use it. And that's, like I say, doing something like a quiz or an informal Q&A session, or just a general update and briefing meeting in online, can be a useful way of practicing and getting people, staff and counsellors, to be a bit more comfortable and confident with the software before you go straight into an actual meeting.
And training of staff, was that required?
No, well, not really. We just kind of started using the software, to be honest with you. Like I said, I circulated the training document that I did. That went to some staff as well. But we just kind of started using it, and internal meetings, catch-ups, one-to-ones. Like I say, we had people using it for like family events or meetings with people outside of the council. That I go back to, like this, the software and hardware is designed to be user-friendly. Like it's really hard to break it if when I used to work for a software company, we used to have this saying. Part of what I did was I managed the like support team, and there was this saying about a call. It's a picnic call. Picnic stands for problem in chair, not in computer. So it would be very good. It would be great with our customers, and we always treat them with respect. But quite very often, the support calls are actually the problem was the person using the software, not the software itself. So we ask members to confirm whether they intend to attend the meeting in person, or whether they're going to join remotely, so that we've got the room set up with the exact number of people. There was I think that the actual setup of the room, getting that right, there's a bit of trial and error for the first few meetings until we're happy with it, and then I had to show a couple of other staff how we do it, so that if I'm not physically at the meeting, somebody else knows how to set the room up. But it was it was really pretty straightforward, and you just find a way or make one.
Well, excellent. I think that brings us to the end of the discussion here. Thank you very much for sharing your views with us today, especially on your birthday. And can I wish you a very happy birthday on behalf of all of us. And thanks for taking up the time to speak to us today. I'm sure our members are going to find this very helpful and interesting. Thank you very much for that.
That's great, Tom. Thank you. And if anybody does want to get in touch with me and wants to have a chat about anything, or wants me to share any of the documents or things that I've talked about, I'm very happy to do that.
Right. And what I'll do, Ian, if that's okay, when I publish the recording, I'll also publish your contact details with it.
Fine.
Good. So anybody out there, if you have any views or comments on today's discussion, then please email me at imeet@iimc.com. I repeat, imeet@iimc.com. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye and stay safe.